We're continuing with the second ois in the Rebbe's Maamer Tafshin Chaf Aleph. In the first ois, the Rebbe spoke about, the Rebbe gave us some summary, summed up the entire Maamer until now, the first 10 oisias of באתי Legani. Now the Rebbe is continuing with the beginning of the next Maamer, which is ois Yud Aleph. And it's an interesting thing that now we start ois Yud Aleph, and we're starting the third Maamer, and as we'll see momentarily, meaning after should be a Perek Yud, based Pirushim Arishayim Shebetzava, after in the 10th Perek of באתי Legani. The Frierdiker Rebbe explains what Tzava means, which means in order to sum up the idea of a Yesheves Bagani, which is the first 10 oisias, which is the fact that there's a bit of a Tachtonim, dwelling place for the Eibishter down here. So he sums it up with the word Tzava, that Yidden are called Tzivis Hashem, Maschil Levayim, Beperek Yud Aleph, Inno Ikli Shebetzava. Now in the 11th Perek of the Maamer, in the 11th chapter of the Maamer, the previous Rebbe begins to explain the primary concept that there is in the word Tzava. Not only this is the main concept in the word Tzava, but this is the main thing of Avodah, like we explained. Tzava, Tzivos Hashem, that is the general idea of the Avodah of a Jew in this world. And therefore, when we're going to explain the main meaning, the primary translation of the word Tzava, this also becomes the main thing of what the Avodah of a Jew in this world is. Why? Because in the Perek Yud, he explained 3 explanations in Tzava. Kipiru Tzava milashin zman, hurak tnai ba'avodah, v'lo y'avodah atzma. The first explanation that he gave in Tzava, which is that Tzava means time, like we say Tzava le'emesh alei aretz, that a person has a set time upon this world. That's only a condition in Avodah. That's not the Avodah itself. Time is not the Avodah. Time is V'hushra Avodah, the Torah mitzvahs. This is the fact that the Avodah of Torah and mitzvahs has to be inside time and space, and in the nature of the world, and it's known various stories of the Rabbeim, like the famous story of the Alter Rebbe, when the boat stopped miraculously. He didn't want to do a mitzvah then because he didn't want to do mitzvahs in a way which is above nature of the world. He waited until it was stopped naturally, because the whole point is that mitzvahs have to be done in the nature of the world. But with regards to this, that's not the Tzava. Doesn't mean mitzvahs themselves. Tzava is in which manner are mitzvahs done. Mitzvahs should be done within the realms of nature. The mitzvah itself is one thing. Then there's a second aspect, which is how the mitzvah is done, and that's Tzava within the realms of nature. The same thing is with the second interpretation of the word Tzava. Peter Tzava milashin tzivi and biskalos. Tzava, which means the set up everything in a beautiful manner, and it's everything included together. That's also not the actual Avodah. That's the preparation, how to get to the Avodah. How does a person manage to do the Avodah properly, in its full way? That's when everything is set up, when everything is included, when everything is united. A person becomes united with all the Jewish people. That's the concept of the fact that before davening, a person must accept upon themselves the positive mitzvah of V'ahavta l'reacha k'amecha. You say the mitzvah of loving a fellow Jew is the foundation of the entire Torah. And as it explains in the Maamer, there's various levels amongst the Jewish people. Those who their primary Avodah is learning Torah, Marirazim, those who their primary Avodah is learning the secrets of the Torah, V'chulu, V'ad la'anashim pshutim, until simple people. V'achana la'avodah in eskalos and kol Yisrael. The achana for the Avodah, the preparation of how to do this Avodah, is to become included and to become united with all of Israel. So here we're saying that this is also something which is not the Avodah. There's again two separate things. There's how I'm able to get to the proper Avodah by first having the tzivyon, everything is set up in its place and everything is included, everything is together. That I have those who are different types of Jews and yet we're all one. That's the preparation for the Avodah. The Avodah itself is something that comes later. Then we have the next thing, which is tzava, which is chayil, an army, kabbalah soil, and that is the Avodah itself. Al-zeu mevar beperek yud aleph. Inyan ha'ikri, the Avodah nishmis Yisrael, vu tzava miloshin chayil. And regarding this, the Frierdiker Rebbe explains in chapter 11, the primary Avodah of the neshamas of Yidden, which is tzava, which means an army, which we'll continue now to explain. So before we go on to explain this in the Maamar, which we're going to see this in the entire Maamar, this concept, but first let's preface with a very interesting thing. There's two numbers. There's number 10 and there's number 11. And the Rebbe explains many times that the difference between 10 and 11, 10 is the completion of numbers. You count from 1 till 10. 10 is complete. 11 is you're already going to the next level. You're continuing on. Or it's a level on itself. But 10 is the completion of numbers. That's why there's 10 spheres. Everything in Kedusha is in the number 10. In fact, we say regarding Kedusha, Eser v'lei Teisha, Eser v'lei Achadasar. In Kedusha, in the spheres, it's specifically 10, not 9. 10 and not 11. 9 is still an incomplete number. 11 is a whole different story. And therefore, in Kedusha, everything is has 10 rather than 11. There is, however, an idea regarding the number 11, and that's why usually we say that the number 11 is connected to Klippa. The Yud Aleph, Alufei Esav. There's 11 tribes or 11 groups that come from Esav. Because in Klippa, it's the number 11. Why is there the number 11 in Klippa? It explains in many Mamar and Chassidus, because in Kedusha, there's the number 10, which is an inclusive number, where the chayus, the godly sustenance that sustains it, is inside it, is felt in it. That's the whole idea of Kedusha. You can feel its godly sustenance. And that's why it's the number 10. The number 11 means that outside of the 10, which is the godly sustenance, which is the existence that there is 11, the sustenance that sustains it, which is separate, which is removed from it, and therefore not felt in it, which that's the idea of Klippa. And nevertheless, we find that the highest Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash was the Avodah of Ketores. Ketores had 11 ingredients, because in Ketores there was also one ingredient, something which we didn't have in any other part of the Beis HaMikdash, that there was one of the ingredients which wasn't kosher. Usually we say that you can only bring as a carbon in the Beis HaMikdash whatever is mutter and kosher beficha, whatever you're allowed to eat yourself. Something that's not kosher you can't bring in the Beis HaMikdash. One of the ingredients of the Ketores came from a non-kosher animal. How does that work? How does that happen? That there should be something which is non-kosher, and what's the idea of the Ketores, which is the highest of it in the Beis HaMikdash, being number 11? So we can see this also from another aspect, that the Ketores reach the sense of smell. The other korbanos are compared to food. Food is something that a person takes inside themselves. A person internalizes inside themselves and becomes part of him. Whereas Ketores is smell. Smell is something which is external, which is outside of the person and reaches his very essence of his sustenance. And this is what we're saying, that with regards to Ketores, it reaches a level which is the essence of godliness. And therefore the essence of the person, which is not able to be expressed inside the physical world. That's why it's an essence, and that's above, and that has the power, since it's above the world, it has the power to transform even the negative. In number 10, it's Kedusha. Kedusha is good, but something which is negative, the Kedusha isn't able to affect. Whereas in the number 11 has the power transform even something which is klipa, even something which is the opposite of kedusha. And that's why it says in Chassidus and Kabbalah that when the pasuk says Achad Asar Yoyim Chaylev, which relates to the idea of Matan Torah, 11 days from Chaylev, from Har Sinai, and in Kabbalah and Chassidus it says there's the Echad Shabasara, or more precisely Echad Shelamayla Me'asara. There is the 10 Aseres HaDibros, which that's Kedusha, that's bringing down Kedusha in the world. Then there's the Echad, the one which is above the 10, Achados, or number 11, the one which is above the 10, that's Anoichi. Anoichi is the very essence of Hashem. Anoichi, we're told, was Lashon Mitzri. It's the language which Anoichi, in Lashon Kodesh, you say Ani. The word Anoichi comes from Mitzri, from Egyptian. Because the essence of Hashem has the power to transform even the most negative thing into Kedusha. 10 is Kedusha itself. 11 is the transformation of the world into Kedusha. And this is, how does this happen? In the Ani, there's the letter Chaf. Chaf is Esrim, 20, which 20 is the idea of, Esrim is the gematria of Keser, the crown which is above the head, the essence of Kedusha. Chaf is also the first letter of the word Keser. That's the concept of number 11. Now with regards to Yud Shvat, we find a very interesting thing which the Rebbe mentions various times. The month of Shvat is the 11th month of the year, as it's called in the Torah, also Chodesh Ashtei Asar. The 11th month is the month of Shvat. The Frierdiker Rebbe's Histalkus was on the 10th day of Shvat, Tafshin Yud 5710. Which means that the Frierdiker Rebbe's avodah in the world was 10 to bring the world to the completion of Kedusha in order to reach the level of 11, which is in months, which is a Chiddush, the renewal, but in days and in years, it went in the Seder of Kedusha. Immediately, Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud, as soon as there's the Staltos of the previous Rebbe, there immediately began the Rebbe's Nesias. But the Rebbe's leadership in a revealed way, when the Rebbe officially accepted the leadership, when the Rebbe said the Maamar באתי Legani, was on Yud Aleph Shvat, the 11th day of Shvat, Tafshin Yud Aleph, which is 11. Because the Rebbe's avodah is the next step. After the avodah of the previous Rebbe, which culminated and completed the avodah of all the previous Rebbeim, which is to bring Elokus into the world and to bring the completion of the spirituality of godliness. Now we're able to reach 11, which is above the world, and bring the very essence of 11 that's above the world into the world, and in this way to be able to transform even the most negative aspects of the world into Kedusha. Now it's interesting that the previous Eis was Eis Yud. In Eis Yud we spoke about 3 aspects in Tzava. Tzava is time, which that's not the Avodah itself, that's the preparation for Avodah. Tzava is the beauty, the inclusiveness, which that's the preparation for Avodah. In Eis Yud Aleph, we begin to talk about the essence of what is the Avodah, of actually transforming the world into Dira B'Tachtonim. For that there's Kabbalah Soil. And that's what we're going to explain in the continuation of the Maamar, the Sfira of Netzach, which is Kabbalah Soil. Kabbalah Soil is when a person doesn't even have the feelings of Kedusha, understanding, feeling. He does it simply because the essence of his soul calls out, and that gives the power, as we're learning the Maamar, to transform even the most negative aspects of the world into Kedusha. That's number 11, and it's interesting that this was the beginning of the third Maamar, which is the Purim Maamar. We know that Purim in Chassidus is very much connected with Ketores, with the number 11. In fact, the Megillah begins to be read on the 11th day of Adar, because the whole idea of Purim is transforming even the negativity of the world, even the most negative thing that there is in the physical world, into Kedusha, v'nahafechu, taking it as explained at length in the Mamarim, etc. of Purim. That is the concept of Yud Aleph, which that's the Ois of this year. the 11th ice, and that's the third Maamar, the Purim Maamar, which we'll begin to explain, and that connects, we'll see as we continue in the Maamar, how that is the general idea of Kabbalah soil of Netzach. It reaches the essence, and in that way is able to transform even the most negative into Kedusha, as Be'ezus Hashem will continue to learn.